What is up, you guys? You mean, ladies and gentlemen? You mean, today I will be watching video and reacting to the video. Is meat really bad for you? And to be honest with you, if I want to hurry up and skip through all of this, yeah, meat definitely is bad for you. And maybe I can share a story with this at the end of it. But getting straight to it, also don't forget to hit that subscribe button if y'all mess with the content, or just drop a like, man. You know, it can never hurt, you know? So, let's get into it.
Food is arguably the best thing about being alive. No other bodily pleasure is enjoyed multiple times every day and never gets old. It's an expression of culture, our parents' love, and a means of celebration or comfort. That's why it hits a special nerve when we're told we should change what and how we eat to fight rapid climate change. One of the most delicious foods, meat, gets the worst press. It doesn't help that the topic is really hard to properly research yourself and that debates get emotional quickly. But clearly, science can give us an answer. The reality is, well, it's complicated. Let's take a
No, the hell is not, bruh. You talking about meat is like straight up, eating meat ain't nothing but just eating dead animals. And like they said, like, you know, you are what you consume or you are what you eat. So at the end of the day, if you're eating nothing but dead shit, then what do you expect? You're gonna be a dead person. You're gonna feel like you're dead on the inside. No energy, no, I don't even know. It's just the fact of like, it shouldn't be complicated. It's like you eat fruits. Fruits is always alive. Even if you cut it off of the stem, it's still alive. It's a live thing. You know what I'm saying? You could put it back into the ground, it could grow. You put some meat, put a fucking hamburger back into the ground. What you gonna grow? A hamburger tree? I'm just saying.
look at 3 climate arguments against meat that are used a lot and see what happens. One, does our diet really play that big a role in climate change? Feeding billions of people is impossible without causing emissions. Even if someday we have zero-carbon tractors, refrigerators and cookers running on renewable energy, and electric trucks to move our food, there are still unavoidable emissions. Rice emits methane. We cut down forests to make room for pastures and crops. And we emit nitrous oxide when we use fertilizers and manure. Worldwide food production is responsible for about 26% of all human-made greenhouse gas emissions, which is unfortunate since food is not optional. While 26% doesn't sound that bad, it means that even if we extinguished all other sources of emissions today, the emissions from food alone would still use up our entire carbon budget by 2100. So no matter how we twist and turn it, food is a real driver of climate change. Still, emissions from different food items vary a lot. How do things look when we compare their footprints separately?
Are you trying to say
Food's climate
that
impact is most often based on life cycle assessments, an analysis that looks at all the emissions of a product throughout its existence, from production to transportation, packaging, use, and waste management. In the most detailed meta-analysis of life cycle assessments to date, beef emissions stand out at the top. On average, a kilogram of beef emits 71 kilograms of CO2 equivalents. Lamb is also high at 40 kilograms. Pork emits 12 and poultry 10 kilograms. At the bottom, we have lots of plant-based foods. Potatoes, for example, emit around 150 times less than beef.
Okay, so you're telling me, right, that the biggest beef product is pushing out carbon dioxide, if I'm right. I don't quite remember what CO2 was. You mean I should have paid, I guess, more attention in school. But yeah, so you're telling me most of the meats we eat is pushing out all this damn carbon dioxide, which is basically the opposite of oxygen, and it's killing us, and we're eating it. And you're telling me that plant-based foods, or whatever you want to say, is even on the scale with beef and everything else? Like,
the most important aspect of food isn't weight, though, it's nutrient density. A kilogram of beef would keep you alive much longer than a kilogram of potatoes. So how does the ranking change if we compare emissions per calorie or protein? Not much. Animal protein is still
So what the fuck? What about people dying from all this fast food and shit like this? Are you telling me if a nigga eat peanut? Oh my god, I'm messing up. You telling me I'm not even gonna throw potato in there because potato is a starch, so it ain't nothing there ain't nothing good in the starch. Let's just get that off the plate. I mean, you can even do your own research because I'm one of the type of people that just tell people to go ahead and go do your own research and don't just listen to me. Like, actually know what the fuck you talking about before you just be like, well, you know, beef is better and it helps you live longer, so. You know, I mean, versus a potato. So it's just like, you telling me if a person eat cheap, if a person that only ate vegetables, fruits, and all this other shit, right? You know, plant-based stuff, versus him eating cheeseburgers every day, is the boy who eat cheeseburgers every day, only beef, is gonna live longer than the guy with a plant-based diet? Are you crazy? Like, you must be freaking loony.
Still the most costly for the environment, and beef and lamb are also outliers in emissions per calorie. But is this fair? After all, not all beef is the same. There are all sorts of ways to rear cattle, from pure grass-fed to factory farming. The worst beef comes in at 105 kilograms of emissions per 100 grams of protein, the best at only 9, a 10-fold difference. In contrast, most other foods, especially plant-based, have a much narrower spectrum. Still, the best beef is worse than the worst plant. Okay, but this seems promising. Can we buy the right beef and lower our emissions? Maybe by buying locally produced beef to make.
You got a goddamn chicken buying food. I mean, buying fucking meat. Like, what kind of shit is that? This nigga a cannibal?
Does buying local food actually matter? Let's stick with beef since it's such an outlier. By buying locally, you are trying to avoid emissions from transportation and packaging. But it turns out these only account for 0.5 to 2% of beef's total emissions. Actually, transport and packaging combined are only about 11% of all food emissions. Nearly all food transport emissions are produced over the last few miles, the regional travel on the road supplying the markets and shops in your area. International food transport happens mostly on freight ships, which are insanely efficient. For example, shipping 1 kilogram of avocados from South America to Europe generates about 0.3 kilograms of CO2 equivalents in transport emissions and around 2.5 kilograms overall, while 1 kilogram of beef from your local butcher will come in at 18 kilograms in CO2 equivalents at least. So even when shipped great distances, emissions from almost all plant-based foods cause lower emissions than locally produced animal products. Okay, so if transport doesn't play a big role, what causes the vast amounts of emissions from beef then? By far the largest share of beef emissions consists of methane released directly by the animals. While CO2 hangs around for centuries, methane only stays in the atmosphere for decades. But in these short periods, it is very powerful. All in all, methane has already caused 23 to 40% of human-made warming so far. There's controversy about
set off a match, that should explode.
We don't want to dive in too deep here, but the way things stand, any kinds of extra emissions are not great. Still, all cows burp and fart to similar degrees. What explains the spectrum of beef emissions? There are a couple of things. It makes a difference if the beef comes from a dairy herd or one dedicated to beef production. 44% of the world's beef comes from dairy cows, sharing its footprint with dairy products. Dairy cows tend to get higher quality feed, which makes them grow faster and emit less methane. Geography also plays a role because it determines which farming methods are possible. The worst factor by far is the destruction of forests for farmland. Not only does this release the CO2 that was bound in the flora, it sets free carbon that was stored in the soil and destroys its ability to store it in the future. This aspect accounts.
Just real quick, man, I ain't mean to stop it, but it's just like, so is anybody else getting at the end of the day, beef or meat is destroying the world, regardless of whatever type of statistic he's saying? Because I'm really feel like I'm being confused by this. You talking about, is meat really that bad? Obviously, like, what the you talking about? Like, what are we talking about here? You're straight up saying, you might as well just be like, yeah, meat is bad. Meat is really bad for you, not is meat really that bad? Yes, it is, because you're proving it.
The range of emissions in beef.
You don't hear nothing about avocados living in the farms, letting off all these fumes.
there is a sinister truth hidden here. The more animals suffer, the better they are in terms of climate change because they are way more efficient. They use less land and their food is brought right to them, and so they grow faster and don't expend energy on things like walking. Cattle in a factory farm that never get to roam pastures can sometimes be less destructive for the climate than cattle grazing peacefully on a formerly lush piece of rainforest. But isn't it a bit out of touch with reality to demonize cows so much? Some of the land these animals are grazing on isn't suitable for crops anyway. By grazing on pastures, they can turn things we can't digest into food. Isn't farming animals just a smart way to make the best use of unused resources? 3. Don't cows mainly use land that we can't use for agriculture or other things? About half of the world's ice and desert-free land is used for agriculture, an area the size of the entire Americas plus China. Half of all agriculturally used land is dedicated to animals. Most of it is grassland, 65% of which cannot be converted to cropland. So pasturing animals is actually a very efficient way to use those areas since we can't grow human food there anyway. There are a couple of catches here though. While the idea of cows turning useless grass into steak is nice, it is part of a marketing lie. Even though it is so massive, pastureland alone can't support the ruminants living on it. Globally, grazing systems sustain only 13% of beef production. So if we were to switch to 100% grass-fed, we'd simply have to eat much less beef.
You really got a burger eating french fries and burgers.
Would crash by some 70% if it were to exclusively rely on grass. The only way to sustain our high demand for meat is by growing crops and feeding them to our cattle. And we haven't even talked about chicken and pigs, which exclusively eat feed crops. Because of this feed demand, less than half of the world's cereals are used directly as human food. 41% is fed to animals. The same is true for soy. There's a lot of talk about Amazon deforestation for soy production, which makes us think of soy milk and tofu. But only 19% of global soy production goes towards products for humans. About 77% is used to feed animals.
What the fuck?
Besides, land without food crops isn't automatically ecologically useless. A beef-free diet would free up around 2 billion hectares, a vegan diet would free up around 3 billion hectares of land. We could use this land to grow forests or restore wild grasslands, basically anything that could suck carbon out of the atmosphere. If we spare 3 billion hectares of land, it could remove about 800 billion tons of CO2 from the air over 100 years. By comparison, we emit about 50 billion tons of CO2 equivalents per year at the moment. Okay, to summarize, food is a huge driver of emissions. Meat, but especially beef, is the worst food in terms of emissions. Buying locally does not have a big impact on food emissions compared to the type of food you're consuming. When it comes to beef, cattle that are grass-fed can sometimes even be counterproductive because they just need much more land. Even if you find the most environmentally friendly beef in the world, your burger still comes with a significantly higher carbon footprint than a veggie patty. You can decide for yourself what you want to do with this information. In fact, you are always only one decision away from making a change. You could start learning a new skill or dive into a new interest today. It's up to you. If only that first step wasn't so hard to take. We have something for you to make it a little easier. We are big fans of Skillshare, an online learning community that offers thousands of classes for all skill levels in tons of creative disciplines like illustration, animation, or film and video. There's something for everyone, really. Unlimited access to all the classes is less than $10 a month with an annual premium membership. The first 1,000 Kurzgesagt viewers to click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Since we started working with Skillshare, you, our viewers, have taken over 100,000 hours of classes, including our own 3 Skillshare classes on how we make our animations. In them, you will learn all the basics like how to set up your project and layers, but also more details about how we work with tools and timing. You'll get to recreate typical Kurzgesagt scenes with our very own illustrations and get a sneak peek into the work process of our animators. If you've always been curious about animation, give it a try. But anything that makes you feel excited and sparks new ideas is a great first step.
I can
If you
skip
want to
this
get
because
creative with new
I feel like
there are still a few extra shiny calendars left.
this
Ask
that
copies
was
and make a loved one or
this is that was the end. That was the end of it. I could just tell because I'm just like, my man's really, he waited all the way to the end. I give him his props though. Okay, I mean, he got straight to the point, and then did sponsorships at the end and stuff. I did not know I had it that damn tall. Damn, should have probably put it down a little bit like that. Okay, at the end of the day, y'all can let me know in the comment section what y'all feel about this. You know what I mean, was it helpful? Was it informational? Do y'all have different opinions about meat now, or are y'all just still like, you know, I ain't gonna never put down a cheeseburger? At the end of the day, my conclusion is everything was bad for meat. No matter how good it was, no matter how cheap it was, no matter how the best quality of it was, it still was bad. Not only for you, but the environment. And I feel like that's really what it's focused on. It mostly just said about the environment. That's all they talk about. Talk mostly about the environment and how it's affected by beef and CO2 and traveling and stuff like that. But like, I'm still against beef. I really think it is still bad for you. And meat in general. So, you know, if you could change something about the way meat or beef, or how about how we eat from a day-to-day basis, then, you know, why not text in the comment section? Let's talk about it. Let's debate. Let's see who information stacks up higher than the other person. But for now, this was your boy Woke. I mean, I hope y'all enjoyed the video, bro. Y'all take it easy. I love y'all, and deuces. You mean, peace out.